Dr. Minshall, what would attract high-tech industries to the Midwest, Indianapolis or the Indiana area in particular?
Well, there are several definite strengths that you have. A lot of the high technology activities are moving towards cities that are very well endowed in terms of universities and colleges, especially programs with PhD level offerings in the sciences and engineering, systems analysis and what have you. Indianapolis kind of being between Indiana and Purdue, and of course there are so many strong institutions there, such as the Medical Center and a few others. You've got that intellectual environment, you've got the pool of scientists, engineers, doctors, and what have you, that really is a very attractive magnet for a number of these.
How do they draw on the universities?
The relationship can be quite complex, and it's getting tighter all the time. You know, traditionally we thought that universities were a source of manpower, scientists and engineers, and maybe jobs for graduates, graduate students and those types of things. What we're finding now is that the university, working with the private sector firm, can establish a number of ties. For example, many of the private sector companies, the high-tech companies, will ask the universities to do research for them. They will ask professors to work with them on a consulting side. They actually want to hire graduate students as interns and workers, and then they will eventually be employed there. A number of the high-tech companies actually will share research facilities both on the campus and in the plant. They will share computers and computer hookups. In many cases, they'll work together to create a science or high technology park. So you've got student relationships, faculty relationships, shared facilities, shared information networks, access to libraries. Many of your high technology decision makers find it very intellectually stimulating to, say, be an adjunct professor at a campus. That's become extremely important as well. Then there's kind of a marriage taking place now, in that many of the private sector high technology firms are working cooperatively with universities to spin off new high technology activities. And they're collaborating on the creation of incubator spaces and starter spaces. And this relationship is being very complex. It's much stronger than it's ever been before.
In the 70s, we saw a great surge in development in these areas on the east and west coast, 128 in Boston, your Silicon Valley in California. Is there the same interest and growth, either developing now or potential for the Midwest?
Yes. Actually, the interest in these things, the high technology parks and the high technology activities, really goes back to the 1950s and 60s. A lot of people don't realize, but the successful high technology parks and high technology areas, such as Research Triangle, the Princeton area, Boston, Silicon Valley, for whatever other areas on the West Coast, a lot of these areas have been in this particular type of development almost 30 years now. And in fact, a lot of this developed with kind of the burst of scientific activity after World War II. What has happened is now, I think people are aware of two things. First of all, they're aware that many of the growth industries and services of the future are high technology. It is, they have a technology component, and they're looking for that. They're also aware that there are areas in the United States that have certain characteristics that foster this development. So I think what you're going to see, it's been developing now very intensively for about the last 5 years. Many communities very aggressively pursuing technology development programs with good research parks, high technology parks, greatly strengthened academic programs, cooperative programs, greatly strengthened technical school programs, evolving new types of incentives for industry. It's the type of thing that it's going to continue for probably the next 5 to 10 years. To some extent, it's not that high technology...
Stop. How can industry leaders in Indiana attract high-tech industry?
Well, now, first of all, let me point out that you used a a term there that we don't want to just gloss over that. You said specifically industry leaders in Indiana as opposed to developers or governmental officials or what have you. And I think, I'm glad you did that. First of all, what we see is that increasingly high technology economic development and the attraction and expansion of growth industries is a team approach. That is, we find that local industry leaders have a role to play in getting involved with, say, committees at the Chamber of Commerce designed to identify prospects, committees at the Chamber of Commerce that their mission is to work with industries in the community. They can actually identify prospect firms because many of these people have been in an industry, say, for 30 years and they know everybody. They can help by dealing with prospects when they come to town. If they have an airplane or a public relations staff, they can contribute services. They can contribute equipment to technical schools. They can work with prospects when they come to the community. And especially important, and I've got to get this in, many of our developers right now need assistance because there have been some cutbacks in the Economic Development Administration programs. And the truth of the matter is that just plain financial support from the private sector can be of great assistance.
Yes, and your private sector is perhaps apt to be more believable, too, to those who are looking for relocation.
We find that a lot of the prospects that are looking for relocations, to some extent, I don't mean this nationally, but you know, once you've been wined and dined by one or two mayors and a couple of county commissioners in the Chamber of Commerce, people realize that it's their mission to sell their communities. And be very honest about it, a lot of these politicians, decision makers, have lived their lives in these communities and think they're wonderful, and that's good. They do find that they get perhaps a little more of an objective evaluation from talking with private sector leaders. From that point of view, it's very helpful.
What direction are we moving with high tech? We're developing rapidly. You're going to see an expansion to other areas of the country.
Well, there's two aspects to that. You've got to bear in mind that there are three growth thrusts here. First of all is the attraction of firms from other parts of the U.S. I think you're going to see more of that. There are some locations in the northeast quadrant of the United States, and one or two maybe in Indiana, that are high cost and do not have necessarily a good reputation for their working environment. You're going to have companies moving out of those. There are a number of communities in Indiana that are going to be attractive to them, and it's important that you make your benefits known. I don't consider that stealing industry because the fact remains is that a lot of these activities are going to relocate. They have to for perhaps some financial reasons. The second thrust is one of working with the companies that you have. This is, I think, important because a lot of people lose track of the fact that probably 7 out of 10 jobs come from the expansion of existing employers. And there's another fallacy that's kind of going around right now of the movement of industry to the Sun Belt. The truth of the matter is that the greatest share of doors that are closed in the Northeast are business failures. So we've got to work much more aggressively with the industries that we have, and many of these have a technology thrust as well. And then thirdly, and this is where Indiana is one of the leaders, is working with new high technology firms, both in, say, chemicals, pharmaceuticals, electronics, transportation equipment, and services such as data processing to create new high technology companies. You have several state-level programs designed to facilitate the development of the new high technology firm. So you really have to think of all three.